Hi guys, this is Sarah with the Wreath Shop here. Today I'm going to be making the neutral welcome wreath kit from the Wreath Shop. It's going to be a fun wreath that can be used any day, in between seasons, anytime, and we bring in a little touch of color with the green. So you get the work wreath form, 2 rolls of poly jute mesh, this welcome sign, it's metal with the holes punched in it already, and you get these 4 coordinating ribbons to go with it. And additional items I'm going to be using, you're going to want a good sharp pair of scissors, of course. You can find these at the Wreath Shop. These are nice and sharp and can cut through a lot of wired ribbon. I am going to be using my Easy Bow Maker to help me make my bow. I like to use a self-healing cutting mat and a rotary cutter to cut my mesh. You can find these at the Wreath Shop too under the tools. And you'll need some chenille stems or zip ties to attach your sign and your bows. I'm going to be using chenille stems. I'm probably also going to ramp my kit up a bit with these cream feather reed grass sprays. I'll pull these apart and put these in at the end. These are not included in the kit, but I think they'll just add an extra touch of something. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to roll out my rolls of mesh, and I like to layer them so I can cut them both together, and it cuts the number of cuts I have to make in half. And I'm going to cut them at 18 inches each. Measure it out on my cutting mat. I'm cutting these all at 18 inches. There are 18 ties on a wreath frame. On the typical work forms that we use, there are 8 around the center ring and 10 around the outer ring. So that's 18 ties total. And we're going to tie 1 of each of these colors into each tie. So we need 18 pieces of each. So I have cut all my mesh, and now I'm just going around the wreath frame, opening up all these pencil ties and getting it ready to add the mesh to it. And we're going to take 1 of each color and put them in each tie on the wreath frame. I'm going to start with the center ring. It doesn't matter where you start. So I'm just letting these ends roll in together and then kind of scrunch it together in the center. And I like to give the inner part of the mesh a little tug so it covers any of these edges that like to poke out, and it makes this nice little scrunchy curl. I'm going to do the same with the other, with the poly jute, and give it a little scrunch. And I make an X with them and then add it onto the frame and tie it in. And when I tie it in, you don't have to do this, but I like to pay attention to which color I added on bottom and which color was on top. And then I alternate to make sure I get like a good even coverage. So this time the green was on the bottom and the tan was on top. So now I'm going to do tan on bottom. And do the green on top. Now these were the last pieces that I cut, so they're curled, they're naturally curled a little tighter. When you get to the bottom, they won't curl quite as easily on you. And I just tie that on to the next tie. So I'm placing these on the wreath frame vertically rather than horizontally against the frame. They're going vertically across it. This is what I do for the inner ring. The outer ring, I'll do horizontal. So now Going to do green on bottom, and like I said, you don't have to be this picky. What matters is that you just get it curled up and on the wreath frame. Now, a lot of the sign and the ribbons are going to cover a lot of the mesh, so you really don't have to be too particular. And then I'm making my X and placing it on the wreath frame. This is the last tie on the center ring. So we've got that all done. Pull these up to fluff them, and then we'll move to the outer frame, the outer ring. I'm just gonna do the same thing. Okay, so we have all the mesh done on the wreath now. Nice, pretty, full, all full of mesh. And we are going to add our sign. I'm going to use chenille stems. You can use the cable tie mounts that you can get from Amazon and Home Depot and stick those on the back and run your chenille stems through there. These come with holes in them. I'm just going to use those. Run your chenille stems through the top and the bottom. And oftentimes you'll just place this in the center and place your ribbon tails around it, and that's the easiest way. I'm going to put this little catty corner. I'm going to try to get it a little higher and off to the left so that I can do a bow, a big large bow down here, and I think that would give it a pretty look. But you can make this wreath however you would like. I'm going to find where I can get this through on the frame up a little high. I just go down through the mesh onto the wreath frame, onto the wire frame itself. And then you can see how that goes through there. And I'm going to twist these together. Give that a good twist. And then I'll do the bottom, and then I can adjust it. It's hard when you just have one of the ties on. I can go back and adjust that in a minute if I need to. It's really good if you can find one of the crossbars. That's a really good place to tie it on. Okay, I have that on there nice and snug, and I'm going to try to get the mesh and ribbons to cover up these spots where the chenille stems are. Okay, so next I'm going to make my bow to go right about there. So I'm taking my easy bow maker, and I am going to start with the checkered ribbon. I want to leave a long tail. I want my bow to have some longer tails, so I'm just using my mat to measure it up. So I'm going to leave the tails at about 12 inches. And you want to twist in the center right there to keep your pattern side showing. I'm going to make these loops about 6.5 inches. And I'm going to twist that again to keep my pattern side up. And measure that out to 6.5 inches, and I'm going to do that again. So we have 2 loops on each side measuring 6.5 inches. And again, I'm going to make this tail about 12 inches long and cut that off. And I'm going to take my moss green ribbon and I'm going to do the same thing with loops, just a little bit smaller. I'm going to make those tails about the same length. This one does not have a pattern. Since it's solid, you don't have to twist it because it's the same on each side. I'm going to make these loops about 6 inches, so just a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make 2 loops on each side again. You can just measure them up against the loops that are underneath them to make sure they're the right size. And if they're not perfect, that is totally fine. You just want them close. I'm going to cut that tail the same as the other. And then I'll do my 1.5 inch ribbons. I'm going to make these tails just a little bit shorter than the others. And again, these loops are going to be a little bit smaller. 1/2 inch to 1 inch smaller is good than the loops underneath it. I'm going to make 4 loops with this one. Actually, I'm going to make 3 loops with this one. Which leaves the tail hanging out on the opposite side or the same side as the other tail, which is fine because once it's wired, you can tug it where you want it. And then the final ribbon, again, I'm going to leave slightly shorter tails. This is what you have to twist and pinch and twist. We're going to make these loops even smaller. Twist it. And then I am going to, I just made 2 loops, 1 on each side with that ribbon. And then I'm going to make just 1 small loop in the center to cover the chenille stem. So this tail is just going to come over to this side again. but we'll make it flip over to the other side once we tie it off. I'm going to take a chenille stem. This one's darker so it won't pop off the black. I'm going to pull my bow up off the bow maker. And you can see how it's all nice and stacked together there. That's how you want it to look. And then I'm going to place the middle of my chenille stem in the middle of my bow, flip it over, and tie it off nice and tight, just twisting it. And then you can see how you can pull these over to where you want them. I'm going to go ahead and dovetail the ends of these. I'm going to dovetail the ends of the 2.5 inch. So you just fold it in half and make that diagonal cut so you leave an upside down V. These I'm just going to cut at a little slant. I often do that with my 1.5 inch, where I like the 2.5 inch dovetailed. Let's see, I want these to go the same way. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this on my wreath before I fluff it. I'm just going to smush it when it goes on there. So just like I did with the sign, I'm going to find a spot to attach it onto the wreath frame. And I want it kind of down at the bottom, but off to the right side. And I just don't want to tie it too far down onto the frame, like all the way down onto it, because I want the bow to be nice and fluffy up here. I don't want it sucked down in the center and have to have the center sucked down in the mesh. So now I will fluff my bow. I've got my tails where I want them. And then I start pulling these apart. So you take the same ribbon, the 2 loops, and pull them apart. But you also want to fluff them up so they're not flat. And then I'm going to do the same with the green. And you want to make these X's with your ribbons. So I want these all alternating. So I have green, then the check, then green, then the check. Over here I have the check next to the green. Green, check, green, check. And then I'm going to pull this top loop of these 3 loops up to the middle, have these out at the sides, and then just fluff that up a bit. And see how we have that small little center loop covering the center so you don't see the chenille stem. The ribbon does like to stick to this poly jute mesh. That's always fun. You have to keep prying it off. Okay, so that is how it's looking currently with our pretty bow. And now we'll add the ribbon tails around the edges. So I like to cut my ribbon tails at 13 inches each. Everybody likes it different. Some like them at 14 inches, some like them at 12 inches, some like them 14 inches around the outer wreath frame, some like them 12 inches around the center. I'm just gonna cut all of mine at 13 inches. And then we're going to pair these up and add them all around the wreath frame. And again, you have 18 ties, so if you want 2 sets of ribbon in each tie, there's 18 ties, so you need 9 cuts of each ribbon. I'm gonna go ahead and dovetail these. Going to do the same with the green. Going to do the same with my 1.5 inch ribbons, but I'm going to cut these at a slant. Always like my 1.5 inch at a slant. I have all of my ribbons cut now, and we are going to pair them up. So I typically like to use a 2.5 inch ribbon along with a 1.5 inch ribbon together. I don't really want 2 black and white checks together, so I'm going to put these 2 together, pair those up. And then I'm going to pair these 2 up together. So, my wreath, and I'm just going to start around the inner frame. I'm going to take 2 ribbons, find the middle, pinch it. If you want, you can always, if you're very particular, you can fold it in half to find the center and then pinch it there. I'm not terribly particular. I'm going to tie that on there. I do not untie the ties because I don't want it sucked down to the wreath frame. I just tie them on top of the mesh, and then I'm just going to tuck away those ties so they're not sticking up. And I'm going to do the same with these. And I'm going to go into the next set of ties on the center ring, which is way up underneath this sign. So I'm going to make sure I am twisting these ties together so that I can tie these in towards the outer edge of the ties, if that makes sense. So you can see these ribbons and they don't get lost underneath the sign. I'm just going to work my way around the wreath, making these X's with my ribbons and pinching. And again, this set of ties is way up underneath that sign, so I'm twisting these ties together so I can tie these towards the outer edge of the ties. And when you fluff your ribbons, let me tuck, again, I'm gonna tuck these away so you don't see them. When you fluff your ribbons, you just wanna run your fingers along them, gently curving them so they're not just sticking up straight. I like to give them a little bit of curve under, a little bit of curl. Continue adding your ribbon tails to each set of ties around the frame. So I'm going to move on to the outer frame. So since we have, let's see, set of ties here. Okay, I'm going to do this one there. I like to try to get these alternating so we don't have this right next to this. I'd rather this be right next to these. This is hiding down here. Oh, let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure the opposite ribbons go across from those. And again, tuck those away a bit. Again, keep adding your ribbon tails into each set of ties around the outer ring of the frame. So we have our wreath all nice and pretty, and this is everything that the kit entails, and it looks gorgeous just like that if you just want to use the kit, but I am going to beef mine up a little bit with these feather reed grass sprays. I think it'll just add a little touch and make it look even more expensive, really nice. Making sure all these are fluffed out. So you can position your ribbons to cover those chenille ties at the holes. So I have a glue pot steady here. You can use a glue gun or a glue pot. I'm just going to pull these stems off. Don't need these extra grass pieces that come off of here. You can just add one of these if you want to use it sparingly, or use two like I'm doing so I can add more. So these are two similar pieces that I am going to add in, I think next to the bow. Twisting these wired ends together. I'm going to dip it in my glue pot. Try to get it so it doesn't drip all over my ribbons and bows. I'm just going to place it in there so it's coming out from one side of my bow. Then I had a similar piece that I'm going to do the same with on the other side of the bow. You could even just get one, if you just wanted to get one of those feather reed sprays, could add it in around the bow like that, but I'm going to add some more around my wreath. some of these that are just little pieces all wrapped together. Here, and you can see how that little bit of floral touch added a little extra something. And if you don't like that, you can also just use greenery instead. Just take something you like or something you have in your stash and place it in there, and it really adds a little extra something. And if any of these pieces you feel are too long, you can always trim them back. Again, this is the Neutral Welcome Wreath Kit from the Wreath Shop. You can find us at thewreathshop.com, and please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos.